Welcome to the KBB Review podcast. I'm Matt Baker and I'm back with another special episode all about the KBB Review Retail and Design Awards. If you missed the news, the event is now sold out, so if you still want to come, you'll have to join our waiting list. Go to kbbreview.com/awards for full details. Before we get into today's episode, I must send a big thank you to our awards podcast sponsor, Sonas Bathrooms. We're very appreciative of their continued support, as between now and the event on Thursday, April the 24th at the Blackpool Tower Ballroom, we'll be bringing you special bonus episodes all about the awards that celebrate you, the very best talent our industry has to offer. You can find out everything you need to know about our awards podcast sponsor at sonasbathrooms.com, and I'll make sure that link is in the episode description. You might have heard in our last episode that the final stage of judging has been completed and our winners have been decided. All that's left now is to announce those awards winners at the event itself, which of course is at the Blackpool Tower Ballroom. I'm really excited, and I've been banging on about it enough these past few months that I thought, well, why not turn the spotlight on our iconic awards venue and find out a little bit more about the tower, the ballroom, and just how springy is that sprung dance floor. I caught up with Edgar, who is our head of operations at the Blackpool Tower, to find out more. Hello, Aaron. Thanks for joining me today. Firstly, just tell us, what do you do at the tower? What's your job?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of everything, but I'm the head of operations here at the Blackpool Tower, which looks after everything from the dungeons to the tower circus, the ballroom, the top of the tower, the lifts, you name it. Sort of everything that goes on at the tower is part of my team.
There's a lot to it, actually. I'm finding out quite quickly. There's lots going on. So can you tell us a little bit about the potted history of the tower itself?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few different variations of the story of how the tower came to be, and it's interesting. There's a chap called Sir John Bickerstaff. He was just John Bickerstaff at the time, and the story goes that he was the mayor of Blackpool. He went to Paris, saw the Eiffel Tower and said, I want one of those for Blackpool as a tourist attraction, etc. And that's sort of the story that everyone likes to believe, and it's really romantic. It's not the case. The reality behind it all is that Sir John Bickerstaff went to an exhibition in London where there was a model of the Eiffel Tower at this exhibition, and at the time there was sort of this growing popularity because it became sort of a big tourist attraction, and I believe it was around 30 towers that were due to be built across the country. In the end, it was only the Blackpool Tower and another tower in New Brighton that was built, and so actually there's plans for other towers, but really the Blackpool Tower is the only surviving example of what happened back then in the late 1880s, early 1890s. But the story actually is he went to the exhibition in London, went to see different things, saw the Eiffel Tower. There was a company that were pitching the idea of building a tower in Blackpool. There's such a longer version of this, which you could probably read for about 5 hours. But the top and tail of it is that this company owned some land in Blackpool. They had shareholders that were going to build the tower on this land. It was a separate company. They were supposed to be based in London. They weren't. They were actually based in the Isle of Man. They were using essentially like a PO box. And it sort of came to fruition that all the money that had been generated through the shares to the Blackpool Tower Company Limited was actually just enough to buy the land. There'd be no tower built, and this is what was happening everywhere, is that the land was being purchased and then there was no more money left, and the land was being sold at an inflated price, and so it was all a bit of a scam, a bit of a con. And I mean, if you come to Blackpool, you'll hear like Bickerstaff's mentioned everywhere, like the council offices are called Bickerstaff House, there's a Bickerstaff Square, and he's really the man behind Blackpool being placed on the map, seeing it as an opportunity. So the real story behind the towers is that Bickerstaff had a decision to take. He had to accept that he would lose all of his money that he invested into the shares of this company, but he'd also encourage friends and family members and local business people to invest in this idea, or they take over the project. And he invested a significant, I'm trying to remember the number off the top of my head, but it was a huge amount of his own personal wealth into the project. And he encouraged a lot of other local business owners to invest in the project too. And actually, there's a saying that the tower is built on cotton bales, which is obviously not true. It comes from a lot of the funds and the shareholders that were had shares in the tower were mill owners across Lancashire that had invested into the town. So eventually, the foundation stone was laid in 1891. The doors opened in 1894. Here at the tower, we had our 130th birthday recently, but on the 125th birthday, we said, do you know what? We want to replicate the opening day celebrations of the tower opening as it did in 1894. So we went into the archives and they're incredible. We went through all this information and they didn't actually have any real opening celebrations because the tower actually wasn't ready. So whilst it opened on the 14th of May 1894, they had to open it to generate revenue to look after and build the rest of the structure. So there's people going up and down the tower, but there was no carpets, there was no windows in part of the building, etc. And actually, it was very, very interesting to read all of what happened back in 1894. But that's how it came to be. There was then huge success in the first sort of 5 years of operating. The Tower Ballroom that you see today is not the original ballroom. That dates from later on, 1899, after the tower generated a load of its own wealth. But how it came to be, that is the story. So it's Sir John Bickerstaff being a really shrewd businessman and then having the courage to take over the project when everybody else probably would have let it go.
God, wow. Yeah, I mean, it's late Victorian, turn of the century, so it's kind of, I mean, I was going to ask you whether it's typical if it's architecture in those days, but I suppose what is really typical about a structure of that size and magnificence, really?
Yeah, no, it's incredible.
Yeah, how do you, in modern day, I suppose, how do you maintain a building like that? I think I've seen some programs on TV about this very subject. It's quite tricky, right?
Yeah, I mean, the tower was owned by variations of the Bickerstaff family right the way up until 1964. So it's a really long time from opening. The major shareholders were the Bickerstaffs. It then had changed hands a few times. It was owned by EMI, the record label, for a period. It then went to a company called First Leisure, and then it was purchased by somebody called Trevor Hemmings, and it was then Leisure Parks, and it was owned from them in the 90s up until 2010. 2010, it was purchased as an asset by Blackpool Council, the first time that the tower's ever been in public ownership. And then Merlin Entertainments, who have all of the big theme parks in the UK, London Eye, Madame Tussauds brand globally, etc., were then brought in to operate at the tower. So from 2010, there was a huge amount of restoration in the tens of millions that went into the tower because for many years it had operated and in some areas it just really had not had the maintenance it needed. Directly behind me here is the front of the tower, all of the terracotta and Accrington bricks. There's 5 million Accrington bricks in the tower, but all the front of the tower, all the terracotta was bashed in for steel to go through, and there was a hideous canopy, which if anybody came to Blackpool in the 90s or early 2000s will remember, there was a canopy that went the whole stretch to the front of the building, and it was not, they just smashed the front of the place up. So in 2010, when the council purchased it, there was a program to sort of take it back to how it was in the early 1890s. So there was all of that initial restoration, and then after then, there is just a constant period that we go through. So every November till April, there is significant work on the stick. So we call the tower structure itself the stick. So this year is no exception to that either. We've got a load of specialists working on the steel currently. We then have the lifts. The tower lifts run 3,500 miles a year. So, they take some mileage. We have a company called Otis, which most lifts, if you get in across the country, the majority of lifts will be an Otis lift. But yeah, so we do constant maintenance. We do work in the ballroom. We spent millions on the roof in the ballroom just over COVID with the support of the Culture Recovery Fund. We did the same in the circus. So it really just is a constant rolling program of refurbishment. And then in a lot of areas, it's restoration too. Because if you go to the circus, if you go into the ballroom, the tiles that you see are original to either 1899 or the year 1900. So a lot of it is restoration, keeping on top of these spaces.
Yeah, I can imagine people like hanging, abseiling to try and clean it and restore it, stuff like that. It's a bit of an operation, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, after COVID, to be honest, it was one of the only positive things to come out of COVID for us anyway, was that the Tower Ballroom is never closed for such a long period of time. I think it was 15 months it was closed because although we were a dance venue, as in ballroom dancing, Latin dancing, we were sort of put into the same bracket as a nightclub. So we weren't able to operate for a long, long period of time. But anyway, in that time, we had this restoration, which if you look up online, you'll see even the scaffolding that went into, it was unbelievable, unprecedented scale. And they actually were looking back in the archives, and they don't think that the scale of work had happened in the ballroom since 1956. And a part of the work was actually taking off the cigarette stains off the murals on the ceiling of the ballroom. So obviously, people have been smoking in there since day dot up until the smoking ban. And actually, when I went into the ballroom, I very fortunate to climb up on the scaffold and have a look myself. And the before and after the restoration was unbelievable. So yeah, no, it was great to see.
Yeah. So what's the just you mentioned the ballroom there, the actual ballroom space. It wasn't the original ballroom, but tell me a bit about that. How did that come to be?
Long story short, there was a ballroom in the tower to begin with called the Tower Pavilion. That opened in 1894 when the rest of the tower opened, and it was a beautiful space, but it wasn't really in keeping with the scale of Blackpool Tower. So actually, there was another ballroom in Blackpool which lots and lots of people will know. Probably not as famous as the Tower Ballroom, but there's a ballroom at the Winter Gardens called the Empress. It's a incredible space that was much larger than the Tower Ballroom. So Bickerstaff at the time said, you know what, we need a better, bigger and better ballroom. They built the Tower Ballroom in 1899, and it was a Frank Matcham space, same as the circus. And again, I just mentioned it earlier, a lot of the revenue was generated in the first years. It far exceeded expectations. So they were able to invest back into the tower. So, which are the interiors you see from 1899. So, yeah, that's how it came to be. From a personal level as well, my great grandma used to come and dance here during the war, and she was telling me, the stories that she would get a ticket, and you'd be able to go to the Tower Ballroom, the Empress Ballroom, and the Palace next door. And she said we'd always finish in the Tower Ballroom because that was like the pinnacle of the night where we'd all go. But yeah, it was really built for dance, and that's how it's become one of the most, well, it is the most famous ballroom in the world. We had a member of our team here who is a dancer, and she moved over to Dubai. The second day she was in Dubai, she actually took a picture. She was in a dance, I think it was a dance school maybe, and they had some footage playing of a dance competition in the Tower Ballroom, and she was over in Dubai. So, it's people come from all over the world to see the ballroom, and it's incredibly special, I think, that it's still operating of what it was intended to be. As much as we can, we open for afternoon tea and ballroom dancing. And then when we don't have afternoon tea and ballroom dancing at nights or, the weekends, we then have events. So we have dinners and we have things like Strictly Come Dancing and films and all sorts of things.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. Actually, I've got a question on that. But how did the sprung floor come about? Is that just because that's a ballroom dancer requirement?
Yeah, and it's great you mentioned the sprung floor. It's one of the best in the world. As we speak right now, it's currently having its annual maintenance where there's 44 or 45,000 individual pieces of mahogany, oak, and walnut in the floor. That all gets sanded down and then varnished, so it'll be looking great next month too. But the ballroom itself, so it is it's sort of an expectation if you're a ballroom or Latin dancer that a ballroom like the Tower Ballroom would have a sprung floor. But with the Tower Ballroom, it is one of the best. We have people that come globally, and the mechanism is original. There was a fire in 1956, but it was restored back to as it was in 1899. We can lock the floor and unlock the floor. So when we have a dinner, we lock the floor, and there's a mechanism underneath which it puts sort of blocks of wood between where the springs are, essentially to hold the floor in place. And it's all operated by hand as it was originally. But yeah, when dancers come in, they go on the floor and they go, "Oh my goodness, like this is like a privilege to be able to dance here." I'm not a dancer myself, but my friends that are dancers, and I've got a member of my family is a competition ballroom dancer, and he's like, the Tower Ballroom really just is the best dance floor in the world.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating, really. Just yeah, just the size of it as well. What's your favourite fact? What's a piece of trivia about the tower or the ballroom? In fact, that's your favourite, personal favourite.
Do there is so many different facts I think about the tower that I find really interesting. I think there's one of the really interesting facts I think about the tower is that throughout the war, the tower continues to operate. There's a really incredible image online that you can see. There's some Polish servicemen that were here in the ballroom in Blackpool for some respite, and there's a picture of them in the ballroom, and the ballroom must have 2,500 people on the floor at the time. But we actually, during COVID, were really quite worried that it would be the first year ever where we didn't have a Tower Circus performance. It has never missed a season since 1894, and it will possibly. I mean, we were saying, oh my goodness, we cannot miss the season for just because of COVID, because throughout both world wars, the circus carried on. So, and I think it really sort of sums up what the tower is about. It's been here for 130 years now. It means a lot to lots of people. And I don't know if I've got it here with me, but I've got a program from 1942 that says the Blackpool Tower, and you turn the program over, and on the back, it's got the circus, the ballroom, the aquarium that used to be here, and it's all in blackout with just spotlights on those areas. And it says the Blackpool Tower providing light in a time of darkness. So the fact that the circus has continued running for 130 years, it's now the oldest one in the world, is unbelievable. And the ballroom sort of really is the jewel in the crown for Blackpool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. God, that's a legacy and a half. So bring it back to modern day then, the modern day usage of the space. What kind of events do you attract at the tower? I mean, obviously we've got our awards at the ballroom. You mentioned there films and obviously Strictly.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different types of events that we do. We've done things like there's a band called the 1975, and we had the BBC Radio 1 crew here, and it was a live lounge in the Tower Ballroom, but with an audience like a concert. So it was a full BBC Philharmonic Orchestra in the Tower Ballroom with the 1975, and that was an incredible gig. We have had films, we've got, I mean, since I've been here for 14 years, and we've had 4 major films in the ballroom. One of them was just last week, actually, which is a Netflix production, which is going to go out, I think, first in Japan. But, there was 500 people here for that. We had Cinderella on Amazon Prime. If you watch that with Camila Cabello, the palace in the film is the Tower Ballroom. Again, that was incredible. But then we do lots of dinners, we do lots of award ceremonies. And I think the thing is that the Tower Ballroom is such a unique setting because it is world famous. And if you speak to any dancer, they'll just be like, oh my goodness, like your dinner's at the Tower Ballroom. That's like unbelievable. But yeah, we do lots of different things. I think a big one that everybody knows in our calendar each November is Strictly Come Dancing. That's a huge production for us, super exciting. The Tower Ballroom is broadcast live to over 10 million viewers. That's incredible and really taps into the original. Some people might remember there was an original Come Dancing program years and years ago that was actually broadcast from Tower Ballroom. And the other thing we have upstairs in the ballroom is some original BBC broadcasting equipment, because it used to broadcast every Saturday night live from the Tower Ballroom across BBC Radio. So that equipment's still there, which is really cool. But yeah, we do lots and lots of events. Hopefully some of the people listening to this are coming to the event next month too, which will be really exciting. I'm sure you're all going to have an incredible evening in a super, exciting space and a really historic venue. So yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly why we booked it. It's mad. I tell people, our awards are at the Blackpool Tower, or not the actual ballroom. Like, yes, the actual ballroom. It's quite impressive. There's other attractions as well. You mentioned the circus, and you mentioned things like that. People sort of visiting, our attendees that are going to be at the awards. What's any sort of highlights? What would you recommend that they do outside of the awards if they're going up for the weekend or something?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to do. I mean, it's fingers crossed for some good weather too, which we usually do get in April. But the Tower Eye will be reopened after its annual maintenance. So that'll be a lift that will take you to the very top of Blackpool Tower. We've then got the external level, so you can go up outside. There's a glass skywalk, which is really cool. There's a bar up there as well. So I definitely recommend getting yourselves up to the very top of the tower. If you do find time, we have the circus performance, which runs on over the weekend, 2 shows, 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and that is acts from around the world. It's an incredible show this year. There's a globe in there with 3 motorbikes. There is a trapeze, which is probably one of the best trapeze artists I've ever seen. There's an incredible quick change act, unbelievable. There's foot jugglers. There's a laser show at the end, which again, to say it just does not give it justice or do it justice. And then there's the world famous water finale at the end of the show. And the Tower Circus is now the oldest permanent running circus in the world. And the family that are currently here have been here since 1990. So yeah, a load of history to be seen there, and another beautiful space, just like the ballroom. Then we've got things like the dungeons, which if you've been to York, Edinburgh or London, it's the same brand with a Blackpool take. incredible attraction. We've then got our other attractions like Sea Life and Madame Tussauds down the road too. But also, I would just say to people, get yourselves out, because if you've not been to Blackpool for a while, you might not appreciate what there is going on in the town. So go and take a walk up. They're up the road at Winter Gardens. It's an incredible space. Used to be owned by the tower, actually, many years ago. But, up by Cedar Square, there's some really nice places to grab a glass of wine and things. So, go out and have a look around Blackpool. But certainly, if you're here at the tower, come and do some of the stuff we've got too.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly will personally, because the next day is my birthday, so I'm sticking around.
Hey,
yes.
Amazing.
So, I do like the idea of the bar on top of the tower. I think a bit of Dutch courage. People might need that.
Yes. Get yourselves up there. And do you know what? If you're coming back in the summer, so summer and September and October weekends, we're actually open till 10 o'clock at night. So you get the sunset and things at the top of the tower, which is really cool.
Excellent stuff. Well, I must say, it's really interesting chatting to you, all things Blackpool Tower with you, Aaron. Thanks again for your insights. Take care, and maybe we'll see you in Blackpool.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to hosting you here in the Tower Ballroom.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So that's the show for today. I'm so ready for Blackpool. Remember, we are now sold out, so if you want to join our waiting list, go to kbbreview.com/awards to find out more. And last but not least, a quick additional thank you to our awards podcast sponsor, Sonas Bathrooms. Our next special episode will be back closer to home, when I'll be talking to the rest of the KBB Review team about how preparations are coming along for the big event next month, what we can all expect as attendees, and generally just lead us into the 2025 awards in what will be our penultimate episode of this special bonus series. So until next time, take care of yourselves and goodbye for now.